the 1.4 ounce layer and the 6 ounce layer in the both halves. It's not completely wetted out in every spot, but I just mixed my 5th batch. First one was filler, then 3 of just resin, and I'm going to go ahead and take care of these few spots that aren't wetted out. It's not really an issue, but I did, while I had the camera off, I rough trimmed the cloth, because when you put the doubler on, cutting through 2 layers of 6 ounce cloth, and gets kind of rough. I mean, I'm still going to be doing it, especially when I do the final trim, but it's just easier to go ahead and do one rough trim, get things out of the way, kind of get things settled in place a little bit more. I've got the fillers all worked in to position, so I don't have to worry about that, because it could be setting up now. Even though the pot life on it was 50 minutes, in reality it's going to take it a little longer than that, especially with me having it cooling here. But I don't have an excess of epoxy on the back here, which is good, so it won't be too heavy. So I'm going to go ahead and put a doubler in. On this particular airplane, I make the doublers go all the way behind the wing saddle, just because I like the strength. I could try to angle them and only do part of the wing saddle, but I'm talking just a few grams. I prefer the strength. I prefer my customers to have the strength in their airplanes, and it gives them to them. And as a matter of fact, on this one I'm going to run a carbon fiber toe stringer under the saddle and back to the tail to give it even more strength. I'll do that right before I do the join. I'm not going to torture you with much of this, but just so you can see the tedium of the big trim on the sides that are going to get lapped. I have to trim the edge all the way down to the mold while it's wet. Try not to pull in bubbles, of course, can't help but do it. And you work it back into place, work the bubbles out, because as you trim, you've got to make sure you aren't cutting too much cloth away. And the wing saddle's really tedious, so I'm going to wait on it till I turn off the camera. What I do is the left side, the bottom gets the cloth tab, and on the right side the tops get the tab, and that way I can slide the halves together, hopefully not introduce too many bubbles. This is the part of the join that is no fun at all. The joint itself is a little tricky, a little nerve-wracking, but just getting it trimmed with these toenail scissors, you have to use curved, or at least I found I have to use curved toenail scissors to be able to get it trimmed close enough to the mold. Takes time. And you can still pull bubbles like the one I just pulled. You have to get it patted back down. Thing is after you do it, you have to come back and trim up any little spots that are sticking up, because they'll cause bubbles to pull into the seam. It'll cause bubbles to pull into the seam when you pull the halves together. That's all one show of the trim. Okay, I've mixed up my 7th and 8th batches of epoxy. This one's got filler. I've already loaded the syringe with the filler. This is just straight resin and hardener. And I've already trimmed the halves of the mold. And now I'm going to work out the bubbles from the trimming. I'm just going to let the camera run and I'll edit out the boring parts. Well, as if all of it's not boring. Hope you enjoy some of it. One thing I'm going to do is, this is the right half. I'm going to wet the tab. Kind of have to wet it from both sides because it's kind of thick. And you want it nice and wet when it's attaching to the other side. It's kind of the key to these wet lap seams, is to have the mating side wet and the tab wet. And have them standing up as straight as possible, so that when you put the halves together you don't pinch it. I do that from time to time, and then you have to pop the molds apart and retry. Sometimes you don't know till after the plane's done. Then you have to go in and tape the seam with 1 inch wide tape. Save it for yourself, or give it to a close friend that doesn't care. And even though I started this a couple hours ago, and the pot light's only 50 minutes on the resin, it's still plenty wet, because the thin film time on this epoxy is over 8 hours at 77 degrees. And I got it into a thin film really quickly, so it works just like it did when I first mixed it up. It's not stiff at all.